Have the pleasure to introduce you our first panel, and I will invite our panelists on the stage. The title of our panel is A Gender Climate: How is the climate crisis affecting women in Greece and the world? So I would like to introduce you our esteemed speakers. First of all, Zefi Dimadama, Senior Research Fellow of the Department of International, European and Area Studies at the Panteion University. Zefi. Mr. Vassililis Koutsoumbas, co-founder and executive director of the WeFor organization. And joining us online today, Mrs. Aubrey Paris, Ph.D., State Department Advisor on Gender and Climate. Mrs. Paris, welcome. So, welcome from my seat as well. I'm really happy to have you here with us today because I think this panel is going to lay the ground for more important conversations that will be happening until 5 o'clock this afternoon. And I would like to start with Mrs. Dimadama because she has so much data to share with us. You and your team recently concluded a piece of research, an amazing piece of research, an initiative that was spearheaded by Women on Top and was impeccably implemented by you and your team on the gender impact of the climate crisis in Greece and in the Mediterranean area. So can you share with us some top-level data that you gathered from this research, maybe ones that you expected to find and also some that took you aback?
Thank you so much. I'm really happy that we are together this beautiful forum and very fruitful discussion. Thank you, dear Stella and the Women on Top, that we have a great cooperation together, and the US Embassy that support our initiatives. Our team in Panteion University, we work in the relation between the gender approaches and the climate crisis and the climate change. And we found out that there is a so strong relation between these two things. And we have, I hope to have more time to discuss the whole research. But now I'd like to highlight that women and men affected differently from the climate crisis. And if we can have a specific target, and we can start from the natural disasters, we saw that we have more women that they die in the natural resources than men. We have more women that they have mental health issues after the disasters. And unfortunately, women has to not only save their lives in the disaster period, but their children also, or the elderly. So women are more sensitive that they have to protect their family than men, that they are live with them or they are alone in a village, especially in the villages or in the city, that they work alone. And we don't have so many died from men.
But you talk about natural disasters happening because of or exacerbated by the climate crisis, isn't that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
We try to focus on the disaster from the climate crisis. We have floods, we have droughts, we have wildfires. And unfortunately, I'd like to highlight it in the wildfires, and especially in the Mati, in the case of Mati, that we have some researchers there. And we find out that we have more women that they die than men. As you know, the way of living in Greek, we have grandpa that they stay with the children in these villages, especially in the summertime. So they have the responsibility of small children or elderly. The very important issue is that we have a lot of women that they know the way out of the wildfires because they know the place. But in this panic and the shock, the people don't trust women because of stereotypes. And they wait from the men to guide them, and not the official men, the firemen, etc. etc. But the men of the family, to give them the order how to go out. So we have this, from my side, this is really, really important, that the stereotypes is extremely interesting and important also in this very crucial time, the wildfire period. Of course, we have more women work after the wildfires as a nurses, as a volunteer to support the area and the people there, and not men. And unfortunately, we don't have also women in the lead positions in order to have this role model. We have a lot of women in the fireplace, in the police, so it's not easy to trust them. Just 2 points in the climate crisis and the effect of the climate change. We have influence in the rural area because we have economic effects when we have floods, when we have a lot of diseases most of the time, and women that work in the rural area, they're farmers, because most of women that work in farmers, especially in Greece, unfortunately are not with insurance. They don't have a specific institutional way of working, so they are without any supporting after these disasters, natural disasters. And because we will have recently the issues of the refugees and migrants, we have to underline that because of the climate change, we are going to have a lot of climate refugees and climate migrants that they will try to find a way to have a better life. And 80% of these people that they are climate refugees are women and children.
Thank you so much for this data. And
this is few points.
I know.
Because,
I know.
Yeah, you know.
The research is going to, the research report is going to be out this week, so we will have the chance to talk about that in more detail. Mrs. Paris, I hope you can hear us. Welcome to the Inclusivity Lounge. A quick question.
Yes, I can.
That's great. So the discussion about the intersection between gender and the climate crisis is rather new to Greece and our region, but it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it has been going on for a while in the US and abroad. So this kind of discussion about this intersection, has it informed your thinking about those two problems, your policy decisions and your work in general, and how do you see that evolving?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the question. And thank you also for having me here today. I wish I could be there in person with you all, but very happy to be joining you virtually. You're exactly right. This conversation is one that has been at various stages in different parts of the world. Probably because different parts of the world have been seeing this problem for longer than others. Now, the intersections between gender and climate change are various, some of which Professor Dimadama overviewed brilliantly just now. But these are issues that are affecting women, girls, youth, many demographic communities all around the world. Climate change and gender intersect when it comes to factors like food security, water security, natural resource degradation, conflict and stability, migration and displacement, gender-based violence, health, education, livelihoods, entrepreneurship. So many intersectional areas here. Now, what this means for the United States and how we've been addressing the gendered impacts of climate change and this critical intersection, I really would be remiss if I didn't start by mentioning the United States National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality, which was released by our White House back in October of last year, 2021. Now, this strategy outlines a series of strategic priorities that must be addressed in order to achieve our gender equality goals in our foreign and domestic policy. So one of the strategic priorities in this national gender strategy is promoting gender equity in mitigating and responding to climate change. Now, this recognizes what I like to consider a two-pronged approach to addressing the gender climate nexus. On the one hand, the disproportionate impacts of the effects of climate change on women and girls must be addressed. But on the other hand, and I think this is, I don't want to say a newer area of thought, but something that a lot of policymakers and policy professionals are, I would say, paying more attention to in recent years, is the equal importance of empowering women and girls as leaders in effecting change and addressing the climate crisis. Now, there are a lot of reasons why this is a good idea for everyone, but I can talk about those reasons a little bit later. This two-pronged approach, though, something I should mention, is that it really intersects with a lot of policy priorities related to gender. It intersects with women, peace, and security. It intersects with women's economic empowerment and also preventing and responding to gender-based violence. So I like to think that climate change is a truly cross-cutting issue when it comes to thinking about gender issues. And that's one of the reasons why this two-pronged approach of addressing disproportionate impacts and empowering women and girls as leaders in addressing the climate crisis is so important. And I should say before I pause that when we say women and girls leadership, we mean in all fora. This is, of course, in decision-making bodies, but it's also important to recognize the really critical role that women and girls play on the ground, oftentimes running local organizations, grassroots projects, initiatives, and programs that are particularly meaningful, particularly effective, because they understand the context of their environment, their community, and their families. And I'll pause there.
Thank you so much for mentioning this two-pronged approach, because this was the basis of how we structured the Inclusivity Lounge this year. We wanted to talk both about women as victims of the of the climate crisis, but also about women as agents of change within sustainability, and also to talk about the economy and how it can facilitate this kind of inclusion, the inclusion of women in sustainability efforts. So, Vassililis, I have a question for you. You are leading the WeFor community and organization, and you have chosen the climate crisis and its impact as your theme, as your central issue for 2022. But you have taken a wider theme, the climate crisis, and you have narrowed it down to talk about how the climate crisis has affected and is still affecting vulnerable groups. For example, women, but also other social groups. So why did you do that, and why did you also decide to focus on the local level of this narrow issue? Why is the municipality and local communities important in this discussion? Why is it important to understand what is happening on the local level?
First of all, thank you for the question, and thank you for the invitation, both personally and to Women on Top. It is an honor for me to be part of this panel of accredited speakers, and the fact that this is supported by the US Embassy as well as the General Secretariat makes it even more enthusiastic. I don't have much to offer to this panel, neither the experience nor the knowledge, but only perspective. Of someone who has been actively involved in community organizing in the past years and who considers climate change to be one of the main challenges of my generation. To answer your question, I grew up in a small city near Delphi called Livadia. To provide some context for those who don't know the city, it can be described as a flyover state. Not much is happening. Most of the people are in the agricultural sector. And whenever new and bold and ambitious initiatives concerning, for example, climate change or digital transformation came to pass, you could observe the same pattern of fear and anxiety in people's faces. What will happen with my life? How my daily life will change, and what's coming tomorrow towards my way. And this anxiety and fear would sometimes turn to confrontation and upheaval, because business leaders, elected officials, and maybe we as community organizers and NGOs, we didn't take the time in our zeal for progress to explain how their lives will change, how they will be impacted, and how they will improve in the end. Take Western Macedonia, for example. There has been a firm commitment by the state to decarbonize by 2027, and I'm all in favor and in agreement of that policy, but we still haven't taken the time to explain to people who build their lives around these plants, around this community, who have fostered their families, and these plants have paid for their education and their future. We haven't taken the time to explain to them how this is going to help their lives and improve them in the future. And this has worked as a foundation for our campaign in Athens, because we think that we have to find a way to correlate our global way of thinking with our local way of acting. So what we do is we organize awareness seminars, open consultation proceedings with young people and small communities and disenfranchised groups within the city of Athens, gather those proposals, and in the end promote them in the municipality in the effort to make these people stakeholders in the policy making process concerning climate change. Because, you know, the ambitious policies of reskilling and upskilling people who have worked 30 or 40 years in these plants, or who have built their lives around a certain kind of day-to-day activity, sounds good on paper. But the actual fact is that it's going to be a very harsh reality to face. So I think that our duty as community organizers is to connect the community with elected officials, with business leaders, and set course towards that path.
And hopefully this model is going to be replicated in other areas of regional Greece who may need it more times.
Exactly.
So that's great. Thank you so much. Zefi, Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is about gender equality, is thought to be the influencer among the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which means that its achievement or its lack of achievement directly impacts most of the other Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. So, in this intersection, gender and the climate crisis, what goes first? What comes first? How do we prioritize among these different areas of intervention, of crisis, and how do we work with those areas which are interlinked but have such so many different aspects in them?
As you have mentioned a lot, and as also Vassililis and our speaker from far away, let's say, it's really important to interconnect the different approaches. To have this, we say we need to have a governance. And in governance, we have different stakeholders. So coming back to the SDGs, and we have 17 SDGs, is a roadmap. It's how we will go in this strategic that Vassililis already mentioned, that we go step by step to organize the three basis axes of the sustainable development. That is environment, society, and economy. So when we talk about gender, we need to have the interconnection with the climate change and the climate crisis, but also we need to have the integration. And we need to have the gender mainstreaming also with the climate mainstreaming. This is an horizontal approach in all sectors, in our policies. Approaches. So now we have two. Okay. So I cannot choose the one or the other. But I think it's so interconnected and works so fruitful and productive under the roadmap of the 17 goals that one by one we can organize some very important initiative. But then, through this procedure, we need to have leaders, and we need more women leaders. Because as we have a service in our universities, in the European level, we saw that when we have in the Parliament more women, we are more open to have a better negotiation about the sustainable development issues. Women are more sensitive of how they will balance the economy, the society, and the environment. And this is because we are more awareness in the issues of environment. Instead, that if we ask women, they believe that no, men knows better. And this is incredible. That women think, because of the stereotypes, that they are sensitive, but they are not better leaders, or they don't have the opportunity and the skills to organize and to lead in this issue of climate crisis. So using the 17 sustainable goals and have in one hand the climate crisis, that it will be a challenge for the future. If I can say, we have a pandemic, we have the Ukrainian war, climate crisis will be worst challenge for our future, and we will need to be ready for that. So I totally agree with the other speakers that the young generation, the women, and the issue of integration and of governance, of sticking together, of have different stakeholders to work in this field of sustainability, and focus of a future that we will have a sustainable development in the first priority, will be a better future. Otherwise, if we try to do that through the local authority, only from our public services, without the private sector, without universities, without NGOs, and interconnect all this issue and have more women in the leadership, and not only, more and more women work in the ecological movements. We have a lot of women activists in the issues of environment and climate crisis, so we need to transfer these women in the first line to work with men and to have this, new era, let me say that, with more women and younger people to work for them climate change and have specific and measurement with specific indication we have in our research to count, to have measure what we will do in economy, society, and environment. Not just saying, yes, everything is okay, we go on with this procedure. We need to measure this issue and to have a specific timetable.
That's so important, and you mentioned the key word, which I will take and embed it in my next question, which is young. So, Mrs. Paris, I find it really inspiring to have two young and very knowledgeable people on this panel. And you are already so experienced, and you are obviously passionate about this issue. But my question is, how are we going to spread this conversation across generations? So how are we going to make the case for the intersection between the climate crisis and gender inclusion? How are we going to make this discussion compelling and explain the need to take action to older people, to hardened institutions maybe, to the private sector or the public sector? How does the business case for a gender inclusive climate policy works? How have you seen it evolve from your work life and your policy experience so far?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and it's a classic question of communication, finding ways to speak to what matters to different populations within society, whether that be different demographic groups, different ages, or different geographies, to be frank. Because ultimately, we need everyone's contributions to tackle the climate crisis. We need all genders, all ages, all backgrounds. It's critical to make sure that we have the vast suite of solutions that we need. Because as we all know, anyone here knows that the climate crisis is affecting different people in different parts of the world in different ways. So we cannot take a one-size-fits-all approach. It's one of the reasons going to the local, regional, national, and international level is so important. Now, when you talk about youth specifically, it's really exciting because youth are some of our most compelling advocates when it comes to tackling the climate crisis all around the world. And you know what? They ultimately want effective solutions. So I think it's fair to say that that perspective of youth can be reflected in other communities as well. We all just want effective solutions that speak to our unique needs. That's why empowering women and girls and achieving gender equity and equality in this space is so important, because women and girls are oftentimes developing some of the most effective solutions. That really roots back to the fact that because of traditional roles and responsibilities within families, within communities, whether that be in Greece or in parts of Africa or Latin America or East Asia and the Pacific or in the United States, there are still traditional roles and responsibilities that place women at the center of the family. In parts of the world, they're at the center of the community. They're the ones interfacing directly with natural resources that are becoming scarce as a result of the climate crisis. And for all of these reasons, number one, they're often the ones who are noticing when there are natural resource degradation problems or other impacts of the climate crisis that need to be addressed. And because they're the ones interfacing with these natural resources in the first place, they are more likely to have ideas that will sustain those natural resources. It's kind of like you wouldn't ask someone to make a decision, or you're less likely to ask someone to make a decision about something that they don't typically work on a day-to-day basis. Now, in the role of being at the center of the family or at the center of the community, women and girls both have a tremendous amount of knowledge about what would be effective in the specific context of the communities where they live and work. They know what's culturally effective, meaningful, and has legs to really speak to their community members and their family members. I mean, I think Professor Dimadama said it very well. We've definitely seen that when women are part of negotiations processes, other environment-related decisions, natural resource management decisions, those decisions tend to be more effective and last longer. And when you talk business case, and I would hope this speaks to most generations, there's a huge economic opportunity here. You know, when we empower women in economic spheres, we know that that trickles down to benefit the entire community, their entire the society as a whole, really, right? And there are so many opportunities to improve sustainability in the growing green economies, the blue economies, really any industry that's looking to make this push to become more sustainable. Huge economic opportunity here, and an area where women need to be empowered and girls need to be educated and feel like they have the ability to work in these spaces. Because ultimately, when women and girls are empowered as leaders and change agents in the climate crisis, they're not just fixing the issue for them, they're fixing the issue for everyone.
Thank you so much. I will keep effectiveness and efficiency as the center of the business case in involving women in climate policy and action. Thank you so much for that. Mr. Koutsoumbas, the discussion around the climate crisis is not obviously just about women. And an aspect that I find most interesting around this discussion is the intersection between men, masculinities, care, and a sustainable economy. So as a young man, how do you see your role as a carer, as an environmentalist, as a community organizer, and as a productive member of the society intersecting with one another?
Thank you for the question, Stella, and I think that you're bringing up a very interesting point that has not been adequately, if not at all, discussed in the Greek public sphere, at least. Now, the caring economy means working together to improve well-being and not focusing solely on maximizing economic growth. Now, this sentence 2 years ago would have sounded arbitrary, to say the least, but I think that the pandemic has made us realize that we need to rethink the welfare state top to bottom. Issues of social policy such as strengthening the social safety net and of course focusing on caretakers in our society have come to the forefront of public debate. And when it comes to caretakers, There is low pay, there is no recognition of services, and there is a gender bias towards that field of work. Now, the arduous task that we all have is to de-genderify work, to de-genderify services, and the fact that a man's success is solely correlated with how much money he makes, the kind of car he drives, the people he sleeps with, and not with love, affection, caring that he shows towards his work, and that is a sign of weakness in certain societies, is a paradigm that we have to shift, and the effort will have to be immense. For me, and the discussion about the climate crisis, I think, is the same. I've read some disappointing research papers stating that there's a correlation between man's belief that they will be feminine or that they will show feminine behavior if they act in an eco-friendly manner, in an eco-friendly way of behaving, of conducting themselves. But caring for the environment is not feminine. Caring for the environment is not masculine either. Caring for the environment is human. So I think that we, as future policymakers, community organizers, industry stakeholders, we have to advocate for that agenda and make it clear to everyone that this is a matter that, this is a matter that we all have to care about. And I'm not sure if it's the aloofness or naivety of young age, but I feel very optimistic about my generation, at least. I think that given the opportunity, we will answer the call to serve, and we will work towards a sustainable and gender-responsive economy built on inclusivity, and not inclusivity for the sake of inclusivity, but inclusivity because it works. Because an open and inclusive environment, and community, of course, not just work environment, is one that fosters new ideas, innovative thinking, and is one that, at the end of the day, in my mind at least, creates community-altering and world-altering policies.
I think it's your optimism that allows us to be optimistic for the future, so thank you so much. And because my panelists were great and they kept their time, we now have 10 whole minutes for your questions. I think there is also a mic somewhere around here, so that your questions go in our video recording. That's great. So, questions for any of our speakers, or question from one speaker to another. I recently started doing that, and it works.
Thank you, and thank you for all your presentations. I wanted to ask all of you for practical steps of what we should do next. So what are some specific programs in the community that we can do to empower girls and empower everybody to think about sustainability? What are some practical steps to empower women leaders in taking a step forward and tackling the climate crisis and any other significant crisis in sustainability? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Eleni, Zefi?
Well, it's really important to have this continuity when we work in this issue, because I think that we need to work also in the research level. We work a lot in the university. I have already write a book about the sustainable development and the 17 goals, but we try to plan, to organize, and to implement these approaches in our university, trying to have step by step, one by one, this target, the SDGs aims, let's say it's a roadmap, as we have already said, and try to have a 50-50 team. Well, it's not easy.
Is it a quota?
Because the quota of our university is more women. We have more girls. And more girls that they want to work in this issue. And sorry to say, it's better students than men sometimes. Well, this is the one issue that we try to work on. And then we try to join our forces also with our parties, because we strongly believe that we need to have these joint forces between us and have this working together. Also with the local authority, the Demos of Kalithea, and how we can have together some common initiatives of how we can work in the climate change, the gender equality issues. But not only that, also to have a smart cities, and what means smart cities, and cities that they can face the climate challenges, and how we can have not only recycling with the classical, the traditional way, but also to have new methods. And of course the education, because we strongly believe that we need to work in education in different teams, in the different groups. And it's really important that when we work in the level of our students, they come and say, when I go back to my village or to my home, I push my mother and my father to do these things also here. About the papers, about the lights or whatever. And that means that we have this, step-by-step circulation of these initiatives and inspiring people. I think it's really important. I hope to have more researchers with the women on top, with the US Embassy, and try to focus in the issues of wildfires, because wildfire is something very important, and unfortunately in Greece we're going to face about in the whole Mediterranean we have 20% increase of the wildfires the last 10 years. So we need to find out ways of protection of our forests, but also what we have to do with the people that they stay or live, or what's happening after wildfires with the people that they are in our areas, and how we will, work more on that. And here is the leadership also, that we need more sensitive climate change sensitive people, let's say. And this is something that I think we have to work with building bridges. It's not easy, but we cannot work separate. We need to join our forces in the issues of the climate and the gender and in the 17th goals.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Aubrey. Sure. Yes, Mrs. Bellali.
Hello. Sorry about that. My name is Thanos Bellalides from Simpraxis. I'm a sustainability professional for many years. As you were speaking, you mentioned about the behavior correlating eco-friendliness with a feminine approach. And I thought you were absolutely wrong. No such a research could be possible. And I Googled it, and you were absolutely right, which was quite a shock for me that such a belief could be possible. And I would like to ask your opinion on this, whether the answer is that being eco-friendly is not a masculine or a feminine behavior, as you said, or whether retaining being eco-friendly as a feminine behavior of some kind could be a positive approach, as the masculine approach is correlated with violence and other negative approaches that we definitely don't need in sustainability. And I know that this may sound silly on my side, but I would like your comment on this. But what is the way to address such a belief?
Here you see social change happening in real time. Thank you, Mr. Bellalides.
Thank you for the question. I was surprised as well, actually, while conducting research for the panel. I came across this. I don't know if it's the same research, but I don't know. I don't think it is a matter of masculinity or femininity, especially in matters of climate change and the climate crisis. But definitely it is not. But the way we have approached it has made it a matter of masculinity and femininity. So I think that in order to change the essence of the discussion, we need to change our approach towards the discussion. So it has to do a lot with how we shape as organizations, as elected officials, as industry leaders, the message of climate change. The bottom line is maybe we need better marketing, I'm not sure. But it definitely has to do with the approach. And what we've tried to do in WeFor, in the open consultation proceedings that we've held over the past few months in Athens, we've taken that topic out of the discussion. There is no debate whether climate change has to do with women or men or people who identify by a different gender. Climate change has to do with everyone. So, by changing the way we approach this on the public sphere, in the public debate, I think that at the end of the day, we might change it. I hope I adequately answer your question. Maybe later on we can follow up. Thank you.
Thank you both. Yes, Zefi.
It's really important, to have another panel with this issue. I like very much, and for you to participate. But we need to understand that the climate crisis affected differently women and men. And this is something that we have already known, and there is evidence about that. So it's not something that we have to, because we are women or we're men, of course we are humans, and this is the priority for all of us, but it's different, the needs, the options, and the way that we can approach the climate crisis. And as you know, my friend Rodi and Anna here and Stella, we can have a different option, a different approach in this issue, and we need to use this thing for a good, for a better future.
And if I may also add something to that, and maybe Aubrey has some data on that, it's not just the climate crisis that affects women and men differently, it's that women and men affect the climate situation differently. For sure. I mean, the masculine way of living, up until today at least, is much more impactful in a bad way on the environment than the way that women traditionally tend to lead their lives, the daily lives. Aubrey, I don't know if you want to add something to any of those questions, of course.
Yeah, I think the comment that I have is relevant in some ways to both questions. Number one, because there's a great question about tangible steps forward. And the second question that led a little bit into I want to say a conversation about what is effective and how to speak to all parties when it comes to this question. And I think it's important that we recognize a lot of people are overwhelmed by the climate crisis. I don't think that's a surprise to many people probably in the room right now. The scale of the challenge is massive, and so it really will take seeing real outcomes and change, I think, to begin shifting the perspective so that people really understand that they can have an impact on this vast issue. Now, one of the ways to do that, I strongly believe, is to embrace the concept of not reinventing the wheel. Something that we've been trying to do at the State Department is identify, specifically because this is a conversation about gender, we've been trying to identify, to find women and girls who are developing local solutions that are effective and help them connect with new communities, whether that be in the United States or in other countries around the world where their solutions might be effective. So helping them to expand their impact, because just because their community is facing wildfires doesn't mean, as you all know, that other communities around the world aren't facing wildfires. So perhaps the solutions they generate in, the Pacific Northwest of the United States might have applicability to places like Greece or elsewhere in the world. We're doing this through an initiative called the Innovation Station. And this initiative is really trying to help women and girls develop, well, not even develop, they've already developed the solution. We're trying to help them deploy that solution in more places. And so I think that is one tangible way forward to make sure that we're connecting the dots between people who are creating solutions and the places that need them. And it will also help with that second challenge, which is actually showing meaningful impact to encourage others to have a more optimistic outlook and maybe develop solutions themselves.
And here I must say that in both our next panels, you are going to hear about these kinds of initiatives in Greece and abroad. I think we do. Okay, great.
Not a question, just a note of my side. From my side, my name is Lena Belsi. I work for the construction industry. I was listening very carefully to everything you said and about this interesting study. Actually, I was thinking I'm not surprised at all, because at least in Greece, it so happens that it is us women that usually take care of whoever is very sensitive and in need, whether it is babies or our old parents when they become older and they need us. And if we all accept that the climate and the planet is now sensitive and needs us, I can only see women leading that also, taking care of this as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So, we are on to our next panel, which will be hosted by Women on Top co-founder Penelope Theodorakoukou. And its title is Women in Sustainability. Is gender equality the key to climate action? Before we go on to that, I would like to thank Mrs. Dimadama, Mr. Koutsoumbas, Mrs. Paris. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Looking forward to all the next discussions.